Okay, so let's see what we got here. Let's see, just the whole chart back again. One last look at the chart. That one, and then, oh yeah, that's because you can also clip it and just choose one planet at a time and just see there's the moon aspects. So this is a whole series of just, you want to look at one planet, you look at, see the sign it's in, see the house it's in, the constellations in, the sidereal sign it's in, you can see the aspects being made to it. And this is standard aspects because really there's a relationship to every planet that's going on, but this is traditional astrology. So it goes through each of them. So if you want to look at the Mercury aspect, you can see the Mercury conjunct Venus, you can see the Mercury aspects. You go down to the Venus aspects, it's shifted over, and there's an extra aspect in there. Then you can start to work, you're working the chart. A planet's colored by the sign it's in, it puts its energy into the house it's in, and it does so easy or difficulty according to the aspects to it. The basics of RASA, basics of interpretation, period. If you haven't got those things solid, which we've worked to do, and just making quick associations by whatever you see, which is what most people are doing in astrology, they know things, but they haven't integrated it, they get a mix, and they're not consistent with it. And they miss some of the in-depth thinking. And as soon as the in-depth thinking is in place, it opens up the ability to be open to deeper things without losing your perspective. So again, all of these are just different pictures of the sun aspects, how they come in. But boy, if you're trying to understand one planet, you got it right there. There's the Mars aspects, sextiles and trines, no squares. There's the Jupiter aspects, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, and this was the IC, yeah, and the ascendant, the midheaven, the descendant. Okay, so those are all the different ways of manipulating these new charts. So these are the 4 types of charts you would get basically from the natal, from the tropical, ecliptic, tropical zodiac. So these are based on the, I call it ecliptical because it's tropical and sidereal. So they're based on the ecliptic, on the orbit of the planet or of the planets around the sun, not the equator, which is what. So really, the houses fit into are supposed to be for the equator, the hours of the day, and the signs are the planetary orbits are in the signs, and they're 2 separate circles, but they've been put on the same chart, and because they're not connected to each other, they're on angles to each other, we have the unequal houses. But the midheaven will be the same in most systems. The ascendant will move up and down. But here's, you can get a chart with the constellations, and one can have the standard aspects, and one can have the colored rays aspects. You can get one with the same charts, standard aspects of color, with the constellations around it. So when I'm making them, once I've got the planets in and have the aspects in, it's just a matter of flicking on the constellations or the stars. That's just added in, they come in easily. But the aspects, the 2 different aspects, they take time. They have to all be drawn in. So once you get the planets in, then you have to work with Photoshop to draw in the aspects. So this is like all the things I'm doing, they're computerized. It can be done by computer now. It's just a question of taking the time, working with someone for 6 or 7 months or a year or 2, and work out all the little nitty-gritty to make it happen. Okay, so that's our first level of charts. The second level charts are the heliocentric charts, which we're going to do almost a whole class where we spend half a class on it. We'll maybe be spending half the class on heliocentric here also. Heliocentric charts are the planet's positions at the time you're born around the sun, not based around the earth. So if you take away the houses and you take away the moon, so you have no worldly concerns and no memory, and you're talking about how energies work for you now and your attitudes to energies, that's your heliocentric chart. It's a step up in the working with the signs and attitudes and colorings, but not relative. It's not working relative to this relationship or that thing or this thing. It's more what happens to me by myself or in my own energy? How are my energies that put you in a more spiritual moment without the mundane specific things and the worldly concerns or the memories? Much of our spiritual disciplines are about detaching our mind and remembering your heart, closing off the mind, controlling it with breath or whatever, or controlling the desires and the emotions so you don't want things so much. The things, the mundane things. As soon as you take away the things, you're left with, you still have specific attitudes to the way you think. So often it's very different. Your natal Mercury and Venus will be in certain signs near the sun, but heliocentric, they can be anywhere, and you have this two-sided way of how you work, how you're thinking about the world and how you think when you get free of it. So these are some of the interesting considerations with heliocentric. Not worth doing until you've done 1,000, natal charts and basic charts. You're not ready to jump up to heliocentric without getting really distorted and not seeing it clearly. It's the next evolution beyond the chart. It's still valid, but there's so much groundwork that needs to be understood. And when you're working with someone, 95% of it you're doing in the natal chart. But other stuff comes in that you don't use for everybody, but sometimes it's useful, sometimes it's needed, sometimes you just get access to things you would never imagine you could get. So these are the heliocentric charts. The constellations are still where they are, and the sidereal zodiac stays the same, and the tropical zodiac stays the same. It's just what happens is, if you're an Aquarius, if you're a Leo, Carl Jung was a Leo, suddenly the sun's in the center, and the Earth is an Aquarius. So in the heliocentric chart, you have an Earth position, you don't have the sun position. And the Earth is your ego and your sense of shepherdess, your physical body. Instead of thinking your circumstance with the houses, it's just your Earth, your physical being. That's it. That separativeness is in the chart. And so I'm not going to do a whole interpretive thing. I want to show you what these charts do. So you'll notice right away what the squares are not just the same size, 90 degrees. They go across the whole solar system. Squares and oppositions can be totally different sizes. And you get a different texture. You still, in these cases, these are when they join up and you have a T-square, the ones that are shaded in. And, but the different sizes and different shapes have different meanings or different points of relevance. It opens up other gateways for understanding. Then you have all the circles around here. What's my next one? Let me just see. Okay, I'll have a closer up look at it. Okay, so we're going to come to the closer up look, but on this is, here are the heliocentric charts for Carl Jung was put in. And you have to, there's no symbols for the planets here. You have to count the rings. There's Pluto on the outmost. There's Neptune, the second planet in. You follow the second one or the third one around. There's Uranus over here in Leo. Then you want to find Saturn. There's Saturn over there. There's Jupiter over here in Scorpio. Then you see the Mars is in Capricorn heliocentrically. I think it was in Sag in his natal chart. It's just switched by perspective. Here's the Earth. So if you did a chart, if you put a circle around this and put the chart from the Earth, you would have the geocentric chart and put the moon in. But this is the view from the sun, and all of that just becomes one thing in the heliocentric chart. Then you see the Mercury, then the Venus. So each of the bands you count out, there are cunning groups of Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. So there's a bit of space so you can see 3 at a time. Quite a few people have these charts, but nobody's ever had an explanation of them, and I'm just figured I better explain it all. On each, so the planets are in position, they have the aspects going on traditionally, but they have different spaces and different textures around it. You're going to see on the wheel, there's a lot of information, a lot of different things in here. It looks like, oh, what's all this stuff? It's all these arrows on the chart, we'll come to that. But the first things you want to see is, if you look at the top here, this point, like just at near the top point on, looking at Saturn, where this is the point where this little orb has a point that goes out. This is the line of apsides. That shows the point where the orbit, all these orbits are put as circles when really they're ellipses. So it's not exactly perfect chart, but it's an angular chart that has the angular perspective. But this tells you where the furthest point away from the sun is. And at the opposite side, there'd be an arrow pointing in. You can't quite see it here. But if you looked at Uranus, there's the furthest point away in Pisces on the left-hand side. And you look at the other side, you see the arrow comes in, the orbit points in, and that's the one that's closest to the Earth. So these are significant things. If Uranus is closer to the sun, if it's closer to the sun, it has more influence than if it's further away. And these can be huge differences in miles or kilometers or whatever you use. But this shows for each planet that's there. So just where Saturn's at the furthest point away, and where it's at its point where it's closest to where Saturn's at the, where are we here? Sorry, where Uranus is at the closest point, the vertical closest point to the sun. Just before that, Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, its outermost, its furthest point out is at Virgo. So it's the furthest away from the sun in Virgo, but Uranus is at the closest, and vice versa. So it gives you this point of closest and furthest, the distance. It shows you the distance factor, how far something is to and from the sun, and how much it's affected by the sun or not in its cycle. Really, these are weather factors that determine the seasons of each planet. But being closest, like Earth is closest. If we look at Earth, here's Earth here. There's the point going out just in Capricorn. And it's on January 11th, where we're at 10th or 11th, where I think it's 10th or 11th, I could be wrong, but it's around there, where the Earth is at the furthest away point from the sun. And it's at the closest point to the sun in the August. So we have winter in the Northern Hemisphere when we're furthest away from the sun, but no, what's happening here? Yeah, okay. So this is how it works. You can see how the weather is affected in Northern and Southern Hemispheres by whether the season is closest, whether the sun is closest to the Earth than or furthest away. Which gets most heat? You know, where's there more desert? Where's it? Like, these things have effects on each planet's orbit and its weather. This distance factors to the sun. How much intensity of the sun? How much rays do you get? How do you get? How far away can you get from it? How thinned out does it get? And the effect of solar radiation going out and affecting the planets, it does that. Okay, so that's the first factor. Second factor is these arrows. Okay, I'm going to go into the next chart, which is a little more detailed. We can see these arrows. There's pointed arrows, and there's tails of arrows. Sometimes the point is pointing to the orb, sometimes it's pointing away from the orb it's touching. These are the nodes of the planets. We have the nodes of the moon. We can see when the moon's on the same plane as the Earth, when it goes up and when it's down. Well, every planet has nodes to every other planet. It has nodes to the sun, to the orbital plane, to its orbital plane, and the orbital plane of each planet to the orbital plane of the solar system, to the equator of the sun, to each other planet, to Earth, and to each other planet. There's all points when those planets will be on the same orbital plane and have maximum effect. So this is all the nodes. Nobody knows the trouble we've seen. There's so many nodes. There's sensitive points that determine when a planet is going north of that orbital plane or south of the orbital plane that is touching. So let's see. If you'll see, if we look at there's the Earth, there's Mars. If we look at Mars and Capricorn here, you'll see there's a whole bunch of south nodes. These will be the south nodes from Pluto to each of the planets. It's be the south node, and that tells you where the orbital plane is going south of the plane it's connected to. So let's see, to the Mars.